Hello everybody. So we're going to start graphing systems of equations. A system is just a fancy way of saying there's more than one equation that we're going to be graphing. Okay, so the answer, the solution, is where the two lines cross. So we've been graphing one line using y equals mx plus b. Now we're going to graph another line using y equals mx plus b, and then wherever they cross, that ordered pair is the solution to the system. Okay, so there's three types of answers you're going to get. If you have two straight lines, and they cross, they're only going to cross in one spot, right? So most of the problems we do will have one solution. It's that one point where they cross. Now, if they never cross, they'll end up looking like this. They'll be parallel lines, and they won't ever cross, so there will be no solution to these lines. And then the other type of answer will be infinitely many solutions. If we graph the same line right on top of each other, then all of the ordered pairs are solutions. Okay, so that was just a quick intro. What I want you guys to do is practice graphing these points and then identifying the ordered pair where they cross. So let me show you what you're going to do on Khan Academy. So I like to use my little drawing tool to identify the slope and the y-intercept. So let's start with this equation first. Y equals x minus 4. So y equals x minus 4. Remember, we always start with that good old formula, y equals mx plus b. And what does the m stand for? What does the m stand for? And what does the b stand for? Okay, so the m is the slope and the b is the y-intercept. I always say that math builds on itself. Those of you that weren't really paying attention last unit, you're absolutely going to need to know that stuff for this unit in order to be successful. So hopefully you're starting to understand what slope and y-intercept is. So let's take this equation right here. Y equals x minus 4. And I want you to tell me, I'm going to put a 1x in front of it, because if there is no number in front of the x, then it's an invisible 1. So I want you to tell me, what is the slope of this line? And what is the y-intercept of this line? Okay, so the slope is 1, because that's the number in front of the x, and the y-intercept is negative 4. Negative 4. You can find that right here. So we're going to take the first line and graph it to make it look just like y equals x minus 4. So a lot of teachers use the b for begin. So I'm going to take one of these. It doesn't matter which line you choose first. I'm going to begin at negative 4 on the y-axis. So I move one of the dots to negative 4 on the y-axis. That takes care of the y-intercept here. Then I'm going to use the slope for the other point. So up 1 over 1. Remember, if the slope is not a fraction, I can turn it into a fraction by putting a 1 underneath it. So I'm going to use 1 over 1. So I'm going to, I like to use my cursor and go up 1 over 1, and that's right where I'm going to drag that dot. So let's make sure I graph that pink line correctly. I should actually circle this one in pink because I'm graphing this pink. Okay. It's crossing through the y-axis at negative 4. That's what it shows right here. And then the slope is a positive 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. So I have correctly graphed the pink line. Now I'm going to graph this second equation, y equals 4x plus 2. And before I graph it, I want to identify the slope and the y-intercept. So what is the slope? And what is the y-intercept? Okay, the slope is a positive 4, and for graphing purposes, let's put a 1 underneath that. That'll help us out. And the y-intercept is 2. Okay, so I'm going to take the other line that I didn't graph yet, and I'm going to move one of the dots to positive 2 on the y-axis. Positive 2 represents the y-intercept. And then the slope is positive. So I'm going to move this dot and create a positive slope. And now I just need to make sure it's going up 4 over 1. So from this line, I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1. So I'm going to drag my cursor or my other dot back to that spot. Let me make sure it's crossing through 2 on the y-axis, and then it goes up 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1. Okay, when I know that I'm correct in how I've graphed them, that's when I'm going to give my answer here. I'm going to look right here. Where are those 2 lines crossing? Do you see how right there is where they're crossing? And what is that ordered pair? That ordered pair is -2, -6. -2, -6. Do you see where I got that? We always write the x first and then the y. Okay, and on the x-axis, you go to -2. On the y-axis, you go to -6, and that is where they cross. That is the solution to this system is -2, -6. So up here, I'm going to make sure I put -2 in for the x and -6 in for the y. Okay, sometimes they'll write it out like that. Sometimes they'll ask you the ordered pair of the solution. Okay, and so do you see how what we did last week and the week before, graphing one line? This is just like that, but now we're graphing 2 lines, and the answer is where they cross. Where do those 2 lines cross? All right, let's try another. Okay, so here, here's the graph down here. So we have, let's do y equals -2x minus 5. Y equals -2x minus 5. What is the slope and what is the y-intercept? Okay, what is the slope? And what is the y-intercept? All right, so the slope was -2. And remember, for graphing purposes, I'll put a 1 under it. And then the y-intercept was -5. So I can take either one of these lines. I'm going to start with my first green dot at -5 on the y-axis. That's where I begin. Okay, and then look at my slope. My slope is negative. So the first thing I'm going to do is just make that line look like a negative slope. Okay, and now I need to make sure it's going up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. So I put my cursor down here at -5. I'm going to count up 2 and to the left 1. That's where I need that green dot to be. So double check. Did it cross through the y-axis at -5? Yes, it did. And does it go up 2 to the left 1? Yes. So I have correctly graphed y equals -2x minus 5. Now let's graph y equals 2x minus 2. So y equals 2x minus 2. What is the slope? And what is the y-intercept? Okay, the slope was the number in front of the x. It's +2. I'm going to put a 1 under it. And the y-intercept is -2. And so I'm going to start. The very first thing I do is bring one of those dots down to -2 on the y-axis. Remember, I'm not going to move the pink line anymore. I've already graphed that correctly, so now I'm worrying about the other line. And then the slope is +2 over 1. So I'm going to first drag this to make the slope look positive, and now I'm going to count up 2 over 1. And when I count, some people were confused on where to start. Go back to that y-intercept that you plotted first. Go back to the -2 and count up 2 over 1, and that's where the next line should go. Okay, and so this one's a little tricky because you can see it's not crossing. Let me zoom in. It's not crossing directly on a grid line. Do you see how the 2 lines are actually meeting somewhere kind of in the middle? So let me zoom back out and show the answer choices. Okay, so it definitely is at it's not quite at -1 for the x. So see, when I come down here, if I go all the way to -1, I've gone too far. So I definitely am going to either choose A or D, because -3/4 is about where it's hitting the x-axis. Okay, the other two are saying -1 3/4. That would be, a little bit too far over to the left. Okay, so I know it's either A or D. And now let's look at where is it hitting the y-axis. And remember, I'm looking for where the 2 lines are crossing. So they're crossing right there, not at that dot. It keeps highlighting the dot, but you see where the pink line crosses the blue line, and that is hitting the y-axis right about here where my cursor is. So it's below -3. It's about -3, maybe -3.5. Let's see. Yes, -3.5. Okay, it's definitely not crossing at -2.5 because that would be, kind of right about that place right there. It is down a whole number at -3.5. Okay, so those ones are a little tricky because they're fractions, but fractions are our friends. So if you get stuck, just watch a video or use a hint, and I promise practice makes perfect. Just don't give up, and you will get this eventually. Okay, so go ahead and click the link and practice yourself. Bye.